Ireland versus New Zealand has become the upset that most people expect to happen. Argentina have beaten the All Blacks 4 times in the last 5 years, and yet people don't expect it to happen. It's a surprise every time. Ireland have beaten them 3 times now in the last 5 years. People expect it all the time. It's become a really interesting game where there definitely is an underdog, and yet everyone expects the underdog to win every time.
I know what you mean. James Lowe's come out after this game and said that he was really frustrated about the fact they lost.
Yeah.
He felt that the All Blacks were there for the taking, were his words. And I think there was a general frustration among Irish supporters, and understandably, because they are on the precipice of being like a world-beating team, and they have been for 4 or 5 years. So I get why a lot of people are really frustrated that they're constantly in a position where you could build belief that they are one of the best teams in the world, and then a game like this will happen and they don't quite cross the line.
Yeah, so we still have no access to footage. We were threatened with legal threats if we put any in, so instead of stills, I apologise, but we want to get deep into the game where it was won and where it was lost. I thought even when there was a point at which Ireland were 10-0 up in this game, and yet I was looking at it and going like, both live when I watched it back twice since, like, New Zealand was a better team.
Yeah.
The entire 80 minutes. I felt like the entire 80 minutes, New Zealand were better. And I think as such, it's a really interesting kind of weather poll for where Ireland are at the minute and who this team are, which is essentially, they're extremely good in the 22. You put them within 10 metres of the line, they will score like 80% of the time, right? They're maybe the best at converting of any team in the world right now, any international side. I think I'd maybe stand by that. And you look at like the furlong try, and we'll get into that in a moment, incredibly clinical, incredibly smart. The rest of their game, however, is the area in which there are kind of, I wouldn't say question marks, but you can get at. But you can either stop them or you can dismantle them. And it leads this interesting team, right, where if they get enough opportunities, they will beat literally anyone, but they're not creating as many opportunities as they were.
Yeah. Whilst we're here, we don't have footage, but I do have a cold, so I'm going to try and talk through this. But you are right. The funny thing about this is, the Irish attack wasn't bad on Saturday.
I don't think it was.
But it was met with an All Blacks performance which wasn't brilliant in the way that you expect the All Blacks to be historically, right? Where if you think of like a brilliant All Black performance, you either think of, oh, they've put 70 points on somebody and every single attack they had, they looked like they were going to score off, right? Or you expect like some destiny performance, like the 2023 quarter-final against Ireland. And instead, this was just a dogged defensive performance. And something that it's easy to underappreciate New Zealand for is the level of sheer power they had. That at set piece, they never let Ireland get on top of them, you know? And when it came to like short carries and stuff, it's not like they were caught behind the gain line very often.
Yeah, I think New Zealand, it's a great New Zealand performance in the way that a great Argentina performance is normally a great performance, you know? And I think the thing is, right, this Irish attack is so about little passes, and the system is incredibly efficient. And around the pitch, they're looking to create line breaks, looking to open things up. Tom of the Three Red Kings pulled up something really interesting off the back of this, that every campaign for the last 4 or 5 under Andy Farrell post the last World Cup, the number of line breaks they've made per game has gone down. And I think a big bit of that is teams are working out how to defend them. And this was natural, this happens to everyone. One side of this has always been, you can stop this Irish system if you have an extortionate amount of power. I would say only France and South Africa have the level of power required for that. And
England on a good day,
England,
maybe.
I think, can pick a pack who can do that.
Yes.
But it isn't necessarily their first choice pack. They need
Agreed.
to contort their team, you know, and get the likes of George Martin and so on in there, who may be behind the Chesham and so on, to get in that and pick that team. Most teams can't do that. Most teams can't physically overwhelm them in that way. So instead, you need to be incredibly smart and incredibly hardworking. It's not enough to be one or the other. You look at Wales and the Six Nations were incredibly hardworking and stopped them for a large degree, but they weren't smart enough and they still lost the game quite comfortably in the end. You look at Scotland last year, they're incredibly smart, but Ireland just kept at them and at them and at them, and eventually they broke them down. And you need to be both. And the All Blacks were both on Saturday. And the exception that proves the rule, I think, is the furlong try. So, comes quite early in the game, the first time Ireland really get into an attacking position in the 22, and they run their usual system. They just go one hit up, one hit up, one hit up, but it's never just one player running that hit up, right? They always have like at least 4, usually kind of 6 or 7, options who could be carrying the ball at any given time. Gibson Park's pass is so good and so fast that he can get it to any of those options. In the speed, a normal scrum half can get it to the first man out, he can hit the third or fourth.
Yeah.
Which is the really dangerous thing about this. Like, Aaron Smith is the only faster pass of the ball I think we've ever seen.
Yeah.
So you're really built around this system. We see it here. So keep your eye on these still images on Cody Taylor, who's behind the ruck. And this is what it takes to stop an Irish attack within 5 metres of line. So Gibson Park throws a really good seed over to Stuart McCloskey, winning a very rare cap outside of that autumn internationals game against like Samoa or Tonga or whoever. He hits a great line. He's going over, but Cody Taylor's worked incredibly hard to get right across and fill an extra gap, to get into position. He hasn't done the typical thing you'd expect from a hooker and just filled in on the edge and allowed someone else to bounce out. He's gone, no, I know in order to beat Ireland, you've got to be smart and you've got to be hardworking. So I'm going to be extra hardworking. Works into that gap, makes a critical tackle, stops McCloskey going over the line, saves.
Forces McCloskey to step inside, doesn't he? Which just buys an extra half second for the rest of the New Zealand defence to get across and stop his momentum.
So following phase then, they go back into the grain. Ardy Surveyor is now the player in the situation that Cody Taylor was in a minute ago, where he's the guy behind the ruck who's having to work in behind and work across. He does the normal thing that any forward normally does, which is he fills in one out and forces everyone else to bounce out and kind of watches around the fringe. And Ireland score. Ireland get over. What you need to be doing, and this isn't criticism of Ardy Surveyor, he's obviously an outstanding rugby player, right? You need to be that hard-working every time they get into 22.
Yeah.
For 80 straight minutes if it takes that. For 50 straight phases if it takes that. You need to be that accurate on it because Ireland's system is so well built to make those 5-10 metres you need to get over the try line. It's why they're so good in that area, and I don't think anything is going to change about that over the next few years, regardless of what direction the team go in, right? And it just summed up for me the All Black defensive performance that for most of the game, they were getting across. And that player was like Cody Taylor rather than a Surveyor in that example. And every now and again, there was a Surveyor moment where someone took the shortcut a little bit. But generally, this was an all-black performance that was incredibly smart, that knew how to defend Ireland and worked unbelievably hard to do so.
Yeah. As you say, like, they probably won't change it because in a way, why would they?
Yeah.
Because this is a game plan that will absolutely paste all but maybe two oppositions in the world, and they came up against one of them. Maybe slightly more than two, but you know what I mean? Yeah. But it's very, very effective in most
scenarios. Ireland could play in the way they did.
Yeah.
Which, as you say, quite rightly frustrated a lot of people. And they would have put 40 points on Wales.
Yeah.
They would have beaten Argentina. They probably would have beaten England.
They'd
they
put
would have
30
been like
points on Italy.
Around it. Yeah.
Yeah, they'd probably beaten Australia.
They would have beaten Scotland, probably would have beaten Australia.
Yeah.
That was not a bad performance.
Yeah.
That was just a performance that, and this is something to get into down the line, I think, but is it going to work against France, South Africa, who have enough power, and New Zealand, who are smart enough and hardworking enough?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, fundamentally, it comes undone against, like, 3 aspects, and only 3 teams can really do that. England on a good day, as you say. Maybe Argentina on a good day as well. I think I'd probably throw them out there as a possibility. But they just happen to come up against one of these teams.
Yeah.
And there's a bit of a worry 2 years out from a World Cup, right? That they probably can't fundamentally change this, because why would you? Why would you take that risk and undo everything just to think about how do we beat the All Blacks, South Africa and France more regularly? And yet that is also how they take the next step.
Yeah. Going back to your point about work rate
Yeah.
and how that can beat this team. Again, this Ireland team are so built around, right, how do we get momentum? How do we get the opposition on the back foot so we can generate these mini gaps where we can get our big carries on the front foot so they can offload or get a quick ruck. They often, to be honest, more prefer a quick ruck than to an offload. But here, James Lowe does a brilliant job regathering this kick here by Gibson Park, and they are straight on the front foot. And as soon as you see Gibson Park going for that lengthy pass, immediately in your head, there's something that goes, they're getting on the front foot here again. They're going to get up to the 5 metre line here. But if you look at Quinn Tupaya's work rate here, getting back to the onside line and then shooting back up to essentially stand in the Irish attacking line, he looks like an anomaly here. The wrong colour chess piece to the one that Ireland are trying to get to this ball to. He's just in the way. It plants that seed of doubt in Crowley's mind for half a second, so he has to just take the ball in. It's the correct decision by Crowley because he doesn't want to throw an intercept pass. He doesn't want to get somebody caught behind the gain line. But that's because what would have been the correct decision, which may have been a ball over the top, may have been a short pass, it may have been a crossfield kick, it may have been anything other than this. It's cast out of their mind by Quinn Tupaia, just flying up and putting that seed of doubt in Jack Crowley's mind there. As well as that, you have the occasional All Black tactic of making these many, many passes, because Ireland don't like one long pass to undo a defence. Certainly not with Crowley at 10. Sometimes Prendergast, when he's playing 10, likes to just fizz one out to get it into a gap. But Crowley fits more what the Irish system, I think, has been going for
Yes.
the longest time, which is, putting people
Lots of
in.
look passes,
Yeah.
interlinking.
Let people
Flick
just
still.
land in a gap,
Yeah.
because Ireland like to play very flat to the line. I think Crowley's brilliant at this. He does it really, really well for Munster as well. They have so many players in the back line who work around this, the likes of Hugo Keane and Gary Ringrose. Hugo Keane obviously injured for this, but you know what I mean? He fits into that. However, the way that the All Blacks went around this is, let's make them make as many of those passes as possible so the ball is in the air for longer, and B, make those passes a little bit longer, which means, again, there's an extra half second when the ball's in the air. That means our players can move off the ball.
Yeah.
Because when the ball is in the air, critically, it can't change direction.
Yes.
The players can.
Yeah.
And so here, this is a brilliant example. They overload Gary Ringrose on his outside, which means he has two options, to either take it in or to pull it back even further and allow the All Blacks more time to fade across and get to the edge and make that tackle on the end, which means that it looks like an overlap originally for Ireland, but because they've got two players in the line who are there to, again, overwhelm Gary Ringrose, and another player who's offset who can join the line and close the gate last second, it works really, really well. And there are so many examples of the All Blacks doing this throughout the game.
The other thing that was really impressive about the All Blacks' defence, and I think that was the standout thing, right, was obviously they scored 4 tries, but it was their defence that won this game.
Yeah.
And here, on this example, right, Ireland really smartly used a blindside, and that was the one thing they really got a lot of change out of, was using blindsides, was hitting back up one way to around the 50-metre mark, and then going down the same way and overloading the blindside. So you have maybe a winger and a forward or two in there, and they are forced to choose who they're going to tackle, and you open a bit of space there. Here, they do it really nicely. Ryan Baird has a lovely touch, and they manage to get right up to the 22. They play one phase in field, and they do that thing that Ireland love to do, where they bring a back in on a short carry because the forwards are all engaged. So James Lowe comes on a short carry, gets over the game line again. Advantage has been called because the All Blacks were offside in the previous phase, and Cody Taylor immediately just goes over the ruck and plays the 9. He does not want them to defend a second longer than they have to. And this was something we saw all day. When Ireland got advantage, and anytime they didn't kick it away immediately, Ireland, the All Blacks system was excellent, but the moment advantage had already been given, they killed the ball.
Yeah.
They did not want to defend any more than they had to because they knew this work rate was huge and they wanted to conserve their energy.
It's what Ireland do best, isn't it? Is they keep hold of the ball
Yeah.
and tire the opposition out until those, as I say, those half gaps
Yeah.
become 3/4 gaps and then full gaps to go into.
This comes back to one thing that I think is in Ireland's control, because a lot of that isn't. And I do question, which is why do they kick so many penalties at goal? This is a team, and it's interesting because England are a team who are so clearly set up to kick 3-pointers, and yet they keep going for the corner. And Ireland, their best attribute is they are so good within 10 metres of the try line, and yet they kept kicking the penalty points, right? And yet Crowley got one of them in that first half, right? But he missed another in that chance that was a really good position to be putting it down the line, getting into the 22. And their whole game plan is about, even if you don't manage to score off this opportunity, you'll score off the next one. You go back to Rob Baxter's old theory, right? That tackles in the 22 count for 1.7 times a normal tackle, almost twice as much effort is going into a tackle once you're in the 22, once you're defending your own try line.
Especially when you consider the Irish playbook as well.
Yeah.
If you get into the 22 and have a line-out, it's another chance to pull out an extra thing in that playbook.
Yeah, so I wonder whether that is something they should be doing differently. I know it's a tight game and it's a huge occasion, but I feel like they maybe could have changed that and tweaked that because they did not generate enough opportunities. And this was a big problem for them because, look, their attack isn't creating enough line breaks, isn't creating enough chances at the minute, and that's fine. There are other ways to get into the game. Their kicking game was very good, I thought, across the board. They did a very good job pinning the All Blacks back. I thought Gibson Park kicked it outstandingly well.
Agreed.
And yet, I think this is a perfect example of the ways in which the All Blacks kicking game was just better than it, right? Both things can be true. Ireland can kick extremely well, and the All Blacks can be the better kicking team. So here, Crowley spots a lot of space, goes to kick into it. Bowden Barrett recovers it on the full and does a better kick down into the 22, almost near to 50-22, and he's just completely pushes on the back. They lose 20-odd metres on this kick. And that is purely Bowden Barrett reading and anticipating. However, if you then look at when Bowden Barrett kind of has the keys himself to launch this, here, this is an exit play. So it looks like what you'd expect is he's going to put it into touch or he's going to put it long and see what happens. Instead, he puts it so long back to the last Irish defender, meaning that Crowley here is forced to kick it. He hasn't really got any other options. He's got no one around if he's going to run it back. He hangs it in the air. Will Jordan wins it. The All Blacks play a phase or two. Then Bowden Barrett really smartly kicks to the opposite touchline. It's like the old tennis tactic, hitting it to one side then the other and forcing them to run back and forward. The ball bounces, again, it's almost a 50-22. James Lowe recovers it just about in time, and he then hits it long, who should he find waiting there but Bowden Barrett, who can now run the ball back, and by this point, the All Blacks are now on the attack in the opposition 22. The game gets a bit loose, they don't quite create opportunities. There's a parallel world where they open this up and they go on to either play great phase play and attack from here, or even Bowden goes through and scores himself or something. In the end, Roygal puts another kick and pins Ireland back into the 22. And so we've gone from one team needing to exit to the other. The All Blacks almost win a turnover on the following set of Irish phases as well. This is so almost a complete, flip of who's in control of the game, and it's purely through Bowden Barrett's kicking game. He is the best kicking fly-half in the world right now, and no one is talking about it because we all think of him still the player he was in 2017 when he's the best attacking 10 in the world. He is a brilliant, phenomenal tactical kicking player, and that's his strongest attribute. You go back to even one of those kicks coming when he's sat in the boot, and everyone thinks he's going to attack, so the defence comes up flat, and no, he sticks it in behind and almost hits that 50-22.
I can hear the comments hating you already for that take, but also, I do agree in the sense that his boot is obviously nowhere near as big as Handré Pollard's or somebody like that, or as clutch as Handré Pollard's even. However, if you think of the reason why I would probably say Ireland were still ahead at 50 minutes is because Gibson Park and Crowley did such a good job of living in the All Black half, of just setting up camp there and saying, you're not coming anywhere near our goal line, we're just going to stay here for as long as we can. And the way that was broken down, and you made this point before we started recording, this was played on an American football pitch, which is a lot bigger, a lot wider. And Bowden Barrett, I think, is probably the fly half in World Rugby these days. Is a crown that potentially used to belong to Finn Russell for a very long time. But I don't have a specific stat to back this up, but I imagine if you were to count who has the most average bouncers per kick they make of any fly half in international rugby, Bowden Barrett would have the most. And the reason why that's important is because the rugby ball famously does not bounce kindly. And if you try and kick in behind, when you're looking at kicking battles, the thing that you want to look out for is how often does the ball bounce, or who manages to make the ball finally bounce if everyone else has been catching it on the full. Because at that point, if you're a fullback, anyone who's played fullback knows this, once it bounces, you have that horrible moment of trying to chase after it and just hoping it sits up for you, when it just keeps rolling and rolling and rolling. And you're very aware someone's breathing down your neck, chasing after it to put pressure on you for your reply. And Bowden Barrett is outstanding at that. And in those kick tennis scenarios as you're going on about, it's invaluable on a wide pitch like this that he's clearly read, right, there's bound to be some space in the backfield, either here in the middle or back there where they're trying to defend a 50-22 and stop that from going out. He's absolutely brilliant at it, and he had an exquisite game in terms of bringing the All Blacks back into it, and was largely responsible for setting up the positions where they've taken the lead. We've not talked too much about many of the tries that they've scored, but it's because they were in the right positions, because both him and Cam Roygaard, who was exceptional, a solid 9-10 out game, 10 game for him, he was absolutely brilliant. They both kicked them into the right places constantly, even without Geordie Barrett on the pitch.
And indeed creates the position for what I'd probably call the winning try, finished by Wallace Atiti, who was excellent off the bench. And I think that's kind of a really interesting way to use him. I thought you got more of them maybe we've seen even in the Rugby Championship, right? Where I thought Simon Parker, who is the most boringly named All Black of all time, he sounds like he should be the drummer in a band from the 50s, not, or he should work in a B&Q. But no, he's a very good flanker. Ardy Survey himself, I thought was excellent at number 8 as well. But Satiti came on and added something different, added some dynamism. Really like the use of him in wide channels and alternatively him popping in the middle of the field as well. This try really, really well taken. And just a gorgeous moment of Bowden spotting what's in front of him, right? He is so instinctive as a rugby player. And even when his brothers are gone around him, he's just got this sixth sense for where everyone on the field is, of understanding everyone, as though they are all, even the opposition players, his brother who he's played against, in the garden since he was 5 years old. So here you just have, it's really simple in the end. Gary Ringrose and Bundy Aki make different decisions. And they've played together how many other times, but they just have a moment of lack of communication. Bundy Aki sits back on his heels and takes a step backwards to try and contain, and Gary Ringrose shoots up to try and make a big hit. And it doesn't matter which one is right, which one's wrong. I think they're both perfectly fair reactions to this. They've just got to both make the same decision.
Yeah. A large part of this as well comes down to Samisoni Tokiaho and the line that he runs towards Bundy Aki. Because if Bundy Aki makes the same decision as Ringrose, there is an argument, and I'm not saying this would have happened, that the short ball for Tokiaho could just lead to a smaller arm tackle from Bundy Aki here, because he's running such a good line. And he's obviously a very fast, very elusive carrier. And so Aki goes, right, I want to get a proper shot at him. I want my shoulder to connect with him. And instead, he sits on his heels. And as you say, Ringrose tries to really shoot up and take Barrett out the back. And instead, the crucial mistake he makes is he gets ahead of the ball here. When you go for a blitz defence, usually where the ball is, because it can only be passed backwards, is a good indicator for like whether or not you've gone too far.
Yeah.
If you're still in line with the ball, you're probably okay because you can get into the passing channel, but the other player can't just change their line and run straight past you, you know? As happens here, he gets slightly ahead of the ball. All it takes is a small little sidestep by Bowden Barrett and a brilliant line by Damien McKenzie, who clearly has read Gary Ringrose and the decision he's going for here, and he times it beautifully. And then the pass back on the inside to Wallace Atiti, who's turned his dummy line into a proper support line.
All of those options flooding through at the same time. You've got Will Jordan on the other side, who... Will Jordan has scored about 8 billion tries in about 4 games, so obviously you watch out for him, the support's on there. Quick word for Caelan Doris, who does an unbelievable job trying to catch up here, and spots Atiti and goes in to pull him back, but I think gets nervous about the referee spotting him, so lets it go. Atiti goes on and scores the try. Doris is the only player chasing across, despite having not played rugby in 6 months. And it's brilliantly worked. It's Bowden Barrett thinking, and it's David McKenzie reacting to that. And that is when a lot of this All Blacks team are at their best, is when they have a system that allows them to wait for moments to break it, to open it up and run chances like that.
Similarly, another turning point of the game was the break set up by Cam Roigard on his own goal line. The sheer balls to throw that pass is incredible. But also, once again, the line ran by Damien McKenzie. Because Tommy O'Brien, very bravely, and I really respect this, because as a winger, even though he's on the correct side to come up into the line, if they're going for a pendulum system, he still very bravely stays in the line and stays high in the line in the opposition 22. And he goes for Damien McKenzie, who very unselfishly runs really square at him, lets O'Brien come onto his outside, again, looking like he wants to get nailed by him, so the ball can fly over O'Brien's head and open that space in behind for Caleb Clark to have a run there. It's absolutely brilliant.
I don't think you've seen many better passes this Autumn Nation series.
No.
It's superb. You certainly won't see any on this channel because we won't have footage for them. But it's brilliant, opens it up, and you see the complete contrast of Ireland trying to run the same thing shortly afterwards, and Bunyoki throwing a bit of a horror pass.
Yeah.
And just shows the difference in that, right? That one is, the All Blacks critically aren't going whip to whip here like Ireland are. Ireland trying to go from one touchline to the other, which is actually quite easy to defend because you've just got to push across, where the All Blacks are going from midfield scrum to width. And that seems more risky than it actually is, right? It's one seed, it's one pass, and it's a brilliant pass. But that still opens it up, and Clark's able to burst down the wing, put the kick in, and put the All Blacks into a really attacking position. They were just incredibly smart over this game. And that was the thing that went out with rugby IQ. Over system, over accuracy, over ball carrying, over anything else. It was a game won by who has thought the most about how you beat the opposition. And it felt like Ireland came in with a game plan focused on themselves, which a little bit of that comes from the fact that they're playing their first game in months.
Yep.
And, the last game they played, they didn't have the head coach in position. So, realistically, it's their first game since March, at the end of the Six Nations, with the full coaching team behind them and the full squad available.
Even then, Farrell was away for Lions duty during the Six Nations.
Yeah.
So, it's been a long time since they had this exact coaching ticket together.
Yeah, no, of course. Where the All Blacks obviously are coming off, they've had, 3 or 4 weeks since their last game.
Yeah.
So they've had a bit of time to focus on this one match and think about how they play Ireland. That showed, I think. But I also think there is something deeper in that the All Blacks just understand how to play Ireland now.
Yeah.
And that goes back to that 2023 World Cup and how hard they focus on them, how they spent months, as we've since found out, months preparing and thinking about that game in particular and that opposition.
You have little tiny moments like Cam Roigard doing this little double job in defence on both Dan Sheehan and Jameson Gibson Park to win a line out. Stuff like that sets up the fact that he scores that try at the end of the game, which looks incredibly simple, losing his marker in Craig Casey and dancing over with 5 metres to go.
It's poor by Craig Casey. He makes a decision on how he's going to defend this before the balls come out of the scrum.
Yeah.
He's kind of sat there thinking, I need to blitz on 10, I need to put pressure on here.
And he clearly doesn't get a call from behind him and still shoots. As in a call from Van der Fleer to tell him, you can go, I've got this covered, I've got 9.
I think both things are true. Van der Fleer is slow getting off the scrum, but also he's had to put a lot of effort in because this is a critical scrum.
And it's a good scrum by New Zealand.
On this, then there's a very good chance that the All Blacks get a nudge on, get a penalty advantage. They really don't want that, so he stays on, he takes that risk, and the space opens up because Casey slips his mark because he's thinking about Barrett rather than thinking about Roigard. And I don't blame anyone for thinking, I need to mark Bowden Barrett.
Absolutely.
Right? That is a fair mistake to make, but it still is Casey's mistake.
It's an accumulation of the rest of the game, isn't it?
Yeah.
Of a good scrum and then going, right, they've overwhelmed us in the back line so many times that we need to come up and try and put a bit of pressure on them. So I don't blame Casey for this whatsoever, but yeah, a brilliantly taken try in the end by Roy Gard. But yeah, there's so many moments like that, and also last point I want to make is I was really impressed by the All Blacks bench. Tamaiti Williams, he's more and more impressive every time I watch him play. Lester Fainga'anuku coming on in the centres was absolutely brilliant. He was one of the best players on the pitch for me. I was really impressed by Josh Lord coming on the second row. I think he put on loads of pressure on the Irish kicking game when they were trying to, put more pressure on in the second half. And also at line-out time, he was brilliant. Damien McKenzie also, obviously, we've already talked about. And Samson Tuka. I'm just listing everybody here. But yeah, they were all brilliant and really closed out the job when, it was a very evenly matched game when most of them came on.
Yeah, I thought Tamaiti Williams was particularly impressive off the bench, alongside City, who I mentioned. And then, you could go on, you could list a starting 15, couldn't you? But like, Barrett is good as ever, Surveyor is good as ever, but then the likes of Parker and the likes of Larkai, and you can go on and on and on and on. Cody Taylor got about everywhere. We're slowly
Quincy
seeing him
Pyer.
slip away from being an 80-minute player, but like, what a 60-minute player he is, Cody Taylor still.
And when you've got someone as good as Samasono Takayaho on the bench, like, who needs an 80-minute player?
Yeah.
Have a 40-minute player if you've got him on the bench.
Word for how ridiculously brilliant Caelan Doris was coming off the bench, having not played rugby in months. Like, ridiculous gamble to throw him in for that game by Farrell, but it paid off.
Yeah, it turns out he's quite good at rugby.
Yeah,
so,
who knew?
Yeah.
Who knew? So, I'll ask this one kind of final question, right?
Okay.
You mentioned one of the big themes of this game was frustration from an Irish point of view. Do you think it's worry or just frustration? Should they be worried going forward?
I think there's two different answers to those two questions in a way. I think there is a sense of worry. Not saying I think they should be worried, but there's a sense of worry because there's a little bit of definition of insanity to this. Of they're playing the same game plan and they're beating 80% of oppositions, and they're still having odd games like this where they're coming up unstuck, and it's really good that they're in a point where they expect to beat the All Blacks every single time. But there are still moments like this when they have ambitions of winning World Cups. And I can see why they would be worried about that. I'm not saying they should be, but I get the frustration.
I look at that team on Saturday, and I see a team who will continue to be very good for a long time to come, but not a team who could win a World Cup. And maybe that's harsh, But I was looking at them just going, like, this is a team who can be undone.
Yeah.
But a team also who will beat pretty much everyone consistently and will win all but 2 games a year.
The thing is, Andy Farrell is so headstrong in his game plan.
Yeah.
And we are going to be the absolute best at what we do. And we might be creeping towards the point where they're a plan B away from winning a World Cup.
Yeah, we'll see if they get that. New Zealand, one final note, right? They play Scotland next week. They play Wales after that, and then they play England. Do you think they have anything to worry about against Wales and Scotland? And then England will get onto down the line.
Scotland...
Wales.
Wales...
England's a big test, we can agree that.
Yes. Wales, probably not, but we're not seeing them play. They're so far unbeaten in this Autumn Nations series.
Tandir, 100%.
Yep. And Scotland, it's too early to tell. I don't think we can read much into the USA game on the basis of the All Blacks. So, yeah.
I think they'll probably be okay.
I think so.